Hello everyone. Welcome to Story Hub channel. Discover real stories of wife betrayals, shocking twists and turns and their secrets. Hit the subscribe button and get to our story. Hey everyone, I'm thrilled to have you here on my channel. Before diving into today's story, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button and subscribe. It's a small effort on your part, but it means a lot to me. My name's Mike Thompson. When this story began, I'd been married to my wife, Laura Thompson, formerly Laura Daniels, for 23 years. We've got 3 kids. Our sons are 21 and 19, and our youngest, a bright 17-year-old daughter, was just starting her freshman year at Stanford when all this started. This tale is about the contrast between being soft and being strong. Now, about 12 years ago, I put on some weight, but in the early years of our marriage, I made a conscious decision to shed those extra pounds and get healthier. For the past 11 years, I've been within a couple of kilos of the weight I was back in my college football days, when I played for a Division III team at 110 kilos. Even with a desk job, I managed to stay fit by working out 5 days a week for 2 hours each day and keeping a close eye on my sugar intake. I only really understood the significance of all this after some major upheavals in our marriage. Laura wasn't exactly thrilled about my new lifestyle. I learned that her initial reaction to my weight loss and better health was anger. She saw my commitment as a subtle jab at her. It was like she was thinking, "Don't you love me as I am?" She even voiced that a few times, which left me puzzled because I never asked her to change and made it a point to tell her she was beautiful every week. In the end, it became clear that she resented my being in shape, and it made her feel insecure. Later on, when it was too late, I found out that Laura's twisted perspective was something like this. I was frustrated that Mike didn't realize that the healthier he got, the more I doubted myself. I projected my insecurities onto him, but I didn't understand that when I started having an affair. Although Laura was bothered by how she compared herself physically to me, I think what really got to her was comparing herself to 3 of our mutual friends, Amy, Christine, and Rachel. These 3 women, who are a year or 2 older than Laura, are all in fantastic shape. They never showed off or anything. Staying fit just comes naturally to them, and they've got strong, healthy bodies. They're also smart and attractive. Amy and Christine have solid marriages. But 2 years ago, Rachel caught her husband being unfaithful and divorced him so fast he didn't know what hit him. I helped Rachel out during her divorce. Besides connecting her with one of the top divorce lawyers in Minneapolis, I loaned her $20,000 to keep her business afloat during the rough patch, which she paid back in 18 months, no interest. I also helped her move into a smaller house. I was convinced her divorce was inevitable and offered to testify for her if it went to trial, which it didn't. I also made sure to show her support, even when Laura was around, and a couple of times over lunch. Apparently, Laura was fuming over how nice I was to Rachel while she was going through her divorce, even though Rachel was just as much Laura's friend as she was mine. Even though Nicole's marriage fell apart because her husband cheated, Laura, in an even more misguided move, somehow thought that having her own affair would solve her problems. Laura had been acting a bit off ever since Nicole's divorce, but nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. Our love life didn't change much. It wasn't happening more often, but it wasn't less satisfying either. Honestly, for the past 17 years, ever since our daughter was born, I'd been the one more interested in intimacy than Laura. The way I discovered Laura's affair is so cliché that I almost feel embarrassed to share it. I was on one of those typical out-of-town trips, but I was driving instead of flying. My destination was about 250 kilometers from home. There was some snow and ice on the ground, so I was a little concerned about how long the drive would take. Before leaving my meeting, I checked the road conditions and saw that there was a traffic jam on the interstate that would last over an hour, with snow starting to fall. I called Laura to let her know I wouldn't be home for at least 4 hours, maybe longer, so she wouldn't wait up with dinner. She seemed a bit distracted during our conversation, but ended it by saying, "Be careful and take your time." After picking up my car from the valet and tipping him, he asked where I was headed. When I told him, he said, "If I were you, I'd take Highway 29 and get on the interstate after exit 86. From what I've heard, there's a major traffic jam on the interstate from exit 133 to 86, and it's only getting worse. If you take Highway 29 to Highway 16 West, you'll save at least an hour, maybe 2. He even pulled out a map and pointed out the route to me. I handed him another $10 tip and hit the road. Following his advice, I got home faster than expected. Once I merged onto the interstate, the traffic was lighter than usual thanks to the jam up ahead. Plus, there weren't any cops around. The snow had stopped by the time I was driving along Highway 29, and I was able to cruise at about 120 kilometers per hour. When I arrived home, at least an hour and a half earlier than planned, I spotted the infamous stranger's car in our driveway. But it wasn't some unknown vehicle. It was Fred Mason's car, the head librarian at the city library where Laura volunteered. Fred's a smug, toad-like, flabby guy in his 40s, and I never could stand him. I couldn't fathom how Laura could be attracted to him. Yet I couldn't come up with any reason why he'd be at our house while I was gone unless it was for something intimate. I parked my car in the driveway of an empty house for sale across the street and walked over to our place. Let me tell you a bit about our house. It's an old place that would probably be called a mini mansion if it were built today. I never really liked it, but Laura was fond of it. For one thing, it's way too big for just the two of us now that the kids are out of the house. Plus, it's a maintenance nightmare. We just finished repainting all the wooden floors, and there was still more to do, like installing new carpets on the long main staircase. The ceilings on the second floor are nearly 4 meters high. There's a back door to the house and a back staircase, which isn't nearly as grand as the main staircase at the front. I slipped off my shoes as soon as I entered through the back door and quietly made my way up the back stairs. Laura and Fred were in the guest bedroom. I couldn't make out most of what they were saying, but I did catch Laura saying something like, "The fitness king will be home in about an hour and a half, so I'll have plenty of time to clean up." I figured she was talking about me, though I'd never called myself anything like that. From the way she said it, it was clear she found my workouts either ridiculous or annoying. An idea popped into my head. If the lights in the hallway and stairwell were off, it would be risky to go down the main staircase, and an accident could easily happen. I quickly made my way back down the rear stairs to the utility room and flicked off the 2 main switches. Then I hurried back up the stairs, using my flashlight to guide myself until I reached the top, where I turned it off and crawled to the edge of the main staircase. The house was pitch dark. I couldn't even see my own hand in front of my face. Laura and Fred sounded uneasy, and I heard Laura say, "Be careful on those steep stairs, Fred." Yeah, he muttered as he slowly made his way toward the stairs. I reached out, and when the toe of his right shoe brushed against my palm, I yanked it forward. The screams he let out as he tumbled down the first and second steps were bone-chilling. By the time he hit the third and fourth steps, there was no scream, just dull thuds. When he finally landed at the bottom, it went silent. Laura started screaming. As Laura cautiously started down the stairs, I crawled back to the rear door, turned on my flashlight to safely make my way down, slipped my shoes back on, and wiped down the switch handles with a rag before turning the power back on. I wiped the back door handle too, then quietly made my way back to my car. I drove to a Starbucks about 3 kilometers from my house, which was on the way to the interstate, and parked on a side street for about an hour. Then I pulled into the Starbucks parking lot from the direction I would have come if I'd been driving from the interstate. I got in line, bought 2 double chocolate brownies, one for me, the other supposedly for Laura, and then headed home. When I arrived, Laura wasn't there, but I noticed a dark red stain at the bottom of the stairs, another one about halfway up, and smaller spots and splatters on the wall near that step. I couldn't help but smile. I carefully walked up the main stairs, avoiding the bloodstains, and saw that Laura hadn't changed the sheets on the guest bed. She must have been in a panic after Fred's fall. I rolled up the sheets, stuffed them into a large plastic bag, and hid it in the utility room. I placed the Starbucks bag with the 2 brownies and the receipt, with the time and date stamped on it, on the kitchen table. Then I called Laura on her cell. She picked up after the 4th ring, sounding cautious. I didn't waste any time getting to the point. "Where are you, Laura? And what's with those dark red spots on the stairs and landing? I just walked into what looks like a disaster zone." She stuttered. "I'm probably asking too much at once, Laura. Let's start with where you are right now." "Well, I'm at Memorial Hospital." Fred Mason, you know, the head librarian. We were talking about something and he, fell down the stairs," she mumbled. "What the hell was Fred Mason doing on the 2nd floor of our house?" I shouted. Well," she hesitated again. "What am I going to find when I go upstairs? I yelled once more. "There's no need to go upstairs. I'll be home soon," she replied, her voice suddenly filled with panic. "It's too late," I said, cutting off the call. I quickly packed some clothes and other essentials, grabbed the bag with the sheets from the guest bedroom, along with the paper bag containing the brownies and the receipt, and headed to a hotel. Laura called me on my cell as soon as she got home. "Mike, where are you? What's going on?" she asked, sounding desperate. "I'm at a hotel. I'm meeting with a divorce lawyer tomorrow," I snapped, then ended the call and turned off my phone. From the hotel room, I called the divorce lawyer Nicole had recommended, who also happened to be a friend of mine. After a few minutes of polite conversation, I asked if I could meet her at her office the next day to discuss my situation. "I'm sorry you need my help," she said, and we set an appointment for the afternoon. The next day, the police showed up at my office. "Mr. Thompson, we're investigating the concussion, lacerations, and broken bones Mr. Mason suffered at your home a couple of days ago, which have kept him in the hospital." "I thought Fred's fall down the stairs was an accident," I responded casually. "Well, maybe it was, but Mr. Mason believes someone may have grabbed his leg and that the house mysteriously went dark and then lit up again, even though the utility company says there were no outages at that time." "Really?" I replied. "So, to make sure we have all the facts straight, where were you at that time?" "It was about an hour and a half before you called your wife at the hospital, around 7:30 to be exact. I was driving home from a meeting 250 kilometers away, and I got stuck in a nasty traffic jam on the interstate for over an hour. I left around 4:30, got to the Starbucks on Maple Street between the freeway and my house around 8:30 or 8:45, and bought a couple of double chocolate brownies for myself and Laura. Then I came home and found red spots and puddles all over. Do you have any proof of your whereabouts? Well, here at my office I have a parking ticket with timestamps from when I arrived and left, for my travel expenses. In my hotel room, I think I still have the receipt from Starbucks in a paper bag with one brownie left, since I never gave it to my wife after discovering her infidelity. You can also check with the state police about the traffic conditions." I handed them a photocopy of my valet ticket and actually went with them to my hotel room, where I gave them the Starbucks receipt and suggested they check the security cameras. Then I said, "This is all I have to offer, and I won't be giving any more statements. If you need anything else, contact my lawyer." I gave them one of my lawyer's business cards and returned to the office. I didn't hear from them again. It didn't take long for my marriage to end after that. My lawyer obtained a court order for DNA samples from Laura and Fred, and when their DNA was found in the stains on the sheets in the guest bedroom, it gave me an unshakable position in the divorce proceedings. Many of my friends and distant relatives called to express their sympathies, but depending on who they were, I either put on a show of sadness, humility, or even mild relief. In truth, only one friend, Nicole, seemed to share my sense of quiet satisfaction. 2 weeks after my divorce from Laura was finalized, I decided to take a trip from Minneapolis out west. I needed to get away. In my mind, I'd already gone through every possible scenario and emotion tied to revenge, Laura, and Fred. Reconciliation, separation, unwanted advice, depression, anger, hatred, regret, you name it. But now it was time to clear my head. Unlike most 45-year-olds who'd been married for 23 years, I had the luxury of not having to worry about money. I'd worked hard building a company that made unique vertical axis wind turbines, which I co-invented. As soon as I discovered Laura's infidelity, I quickly accepted the most lucrative of several offers I'd received from large multinational corporations over the past couple of years. The offer I chose was the best for my employees, and the second most profitable for me personally. The difference in profit between that and the highest offer was negligible. You can only spend so much money in a lifetime. What was particularly satisfying was the fact that I didn't have to share any of the proceeds from the sale of my company with my ex-wife, even though she received half of everything else we owned and bought me out of my share of the house. She ended up quite comfortable, but not nearly as wealthy as I was. 17 years ago, before I could secure a loan to start my wind turbine company, the insurer insisted that Laura waive all her rights because they couldn't risk a change in management. For that, she was paid $200,000, which she transferred to an account that I signed all rights over to. At the time, she was thrilled with the money because she didn't believe in the success of my business. She wasn't so thrilled when she found out how much I made from selling the company. Ha ha ha. My 21-year-old and 19-year-old sons, one of whom was in college when I filed for divorce, and the other in his second year, agreed with my decision once they knew the facts. My 17-year-old daughter, a brilliant Stanford freshman at the time, with her education already paid for, was furious that I refused to reconcile. She told me that her mom, my wife, had lost her way because of low self-esteem and no longer feeling attractive, so she was just seeking some kind of validation. And now, she was full of regret, as if waving a magic wand could make everything disappear. But that didn't change anything for me. There may have been some truth to the argument about low self-esteem for the reasons I mentioned earlier, but it wasn't something I could forgive, no matter the excuse. After spending 2 weeks exploring various national parks and monuments, usually staying 2 or 3 nights at each spot, I drove my Tesla Model X to Peach Springs, Arizona, near the Grand Canyon. After enjoying 2 fun days there, I decided to go on a guided hike and spend the night at the bottom of the canyon. Our hike leader was a guy named Rex, probably around 50 years old, who looked like he could have walked straight out of the Scottish Highlands. The group was made up of a married couple in their 40s from England, 2 college students from Montana, 2 sisters named Linda and Sarah, who looked to be about 30, and Sarah's 17-year-old daughter, Beth. Later, I found out that Linda was 39, and Sarah was 36. It was a friendly bunch, and we really got to know each other pretty well. We started the hike at 8 a.m., and by the time we were ready to hit the sleeping bags around 10 p.m., it was early autumn, with the temperature warm but not overly hot. Nobody in the group was particularly striking except for Linda and Sarah. To put it bluntly, the sisters were like something out of an erotic dream. Linda was married, but her husband couldn't make the trip because of work and was supposed to meet them at Zion National Park in a few days. Sarah had recently gotten divorced. Beth was a pretty teenager, but seemed a bit withdrawn, and I had a hunch that one reason for this trip with her mom and aunt was to help her unwind a little. I ended up sitting between Linda and Sarah during dinner, and as we sipped on the bourbon I'd brought along, I managed to make quite an impression on everyone, including Rex, by telling 2 ghost stories, the vanishing hitchhiker and the Bell Witch. Then Rex took over and told the tale of Bloody Mary, which I knew well, especially the ending. I could see that Beth was completely captivated by all 3 stories, sitting on the edge of her seat, practically spellbound when Rex reached the climax of his tale. Just as he got to the scariest part, I snuck up behind Beth, grabbed her shoulders and yelled, "Bloody Mary is here!" I think Beth might have set a world record in the sitting long jump and the 20-meter dash when she screamed and bolted. When she realized we were all laughing, she turned around, first horrified, but then, as I shouted, "Gotcha!" she took off after me. Linda and Sarah joined the chase, and I let them catch me, pretending to be as clumsy as possible while they poured sand on my shirt. Everyone had a good laugh, and Beth stuck her tongue out at me as if to say, "Gotcha." To be honest, falling asleep that night wasn't easy, and it wasn't because of the bits of sand stuck to my back. What really kept me up was thinking about Sarah. I didn't mind at all when she held me down while Beth sprinkled sand on my shirt. Sarah is a strong woman, reminding me a lot of Nicole, only taller. Just as I was finally drifting off, I heard a scream. It sounded just like Beth's scream when I'd grabbed her shoulders during the Bloody Mary story. I shot out of my sleeping bag, and about 30 meters away, I saw something that looked like a large cat. I sprinted over barefoot, picked up a rock along the way, and swung it hard at what turned out to be a medium-sized mountain lioness on Beth's back. The cat growled and then took off. I rushed to Beth, wrapped her in my arms, and told her she was safe now. She was sobbing uncontrollably against my chest. By the time I got to Beth, the whole camp was already wide awake. Linda and Sarah rushed over to Beth and wrapped her in their arms as well. Once she calmed down a bit, Beth explained that she had gotten up to use the bathroom, and when she was on her way back, something had jumped on her. Beth had quite a few scratches, but because she quickly curled into a fetal position, and I reached her in seconds, she wasn't seriously injured. Rex treated her cuts and scrapes with his first aid kit, and the next day, we made sure she got a tetanus shot. When Beth went back to her sleeping bag, she insisted on placing it right next to mine and kept it touching mine. Linda, Sarah, and I were extra attentive to Beth on the hike back the next day. In fact, I insisted on carrying her backpack for her. I spent most of the hike talking with Beth while keeping my eyes on Linda and Sarah, and Beth seemed much more relaxed. She was interested in a career in renewable energy, which happens to be my field, so I was happy to share all the information I could. That evening, I treated Beth, Linda, and Sarah to dinner. We had a fantastic time. Around 10 o'clock, Beth started to get sleepy, so Linda took her back to their room. I noticed a knowing glance exchanged between Linda and Sarah as they left, and I hoped it meant what I thought it did. After Linda and Beth left, Sarah and I had a drink together, and she didn't need much alcohol to start flirting with me. Eventually, Sarah got bold. In the middle of talking about something completely unrelated, she poked me in the chest and said, "You know, Linda thinks you deserve a reward, not just for saving Beth, but also for helping her feel safe again." "Oh, really?" I laughed. "And what kind of reward might that be?" "Well, since she's married, she can't give it to you. But since I'm divorced, I have the not-so-unpleasant duty of providing it," she said with a devilish grin. "I wouldn't want to hurt you," I teased back. "Do you have any prints in your room that we need to go check out?" she asked, her grin growing even more mischievous as she traced her finger down my chest. I signed the check, and 2 minutes later, we were naked in my room. "Hell no," I murmured, trying to kiss her, and then added, "And you're on birth control, right?" After another playful struggle, she whimpered, "I just had my last Depo-Provera shot a week ago." With that, I lifted her up and laid her on my bed. I wasn't about to turn down such an invitation. When we finally caught our breath, we were both dizzy. "Wow, you sure know how to make love," I said, smiling as I kissed her nose and lips. "If my ex-husband knew how to make love like you, we'd probably still be married," she replied, returning the kisses to my nose and lips. I think we passed out more than fell asleep, but we woke up in the middle of the night at about the same time. I drifted off again with a smile on my face and joy in my heart. The next morning, when Sarah and I finally made our way into the dining room, she was still wearing the same clothes from the night before. Linda and Beth were already seated at the table, grinning from ear to ear as they waited for us. Beth was relentless with her jokes, sarcastic remarks, and playful teasing, though it was clear she was finally letting her guard down and relaxing. Linda just kept smiling. When Beth and Sarah went to the bathroom, Linda slid her chair closer to mine. "I'd give you a reward too if I wasn't married, Mike," she chuckled, taking a bite of sausage. As I made sure to blush and adjust my pants, she continued, "I'm sure Sarah did a great job. But since you're a good guy, I feel like I should warn you about something." "What's that?" I asked, a bit taken aback. "Sarah got divorced because she cheated, and I don't think she's really capable of changing. But next week she's going to give you the best time of your life. Just don't fall in love with her," Linda whispered in my ear. Then she flashed a smile, moved her chair back to its original spot, and by the time Sarah and Beth returned, we were already deep in a conversation about politics. I was really grateful to Linda for the heads up, because Sarah was definitely someone I could have fallen for. The next day, Beth and Linda headed off to meet their father and husband in Zion, while Sarah accepted my invitation to travel with me for the remaining 6 days of her vacation. Spending that time with her made me start thinking about the future. When I eventually dropped Sarah off at the Los Angeles airport, I paid for her flight home since she didn't have a return ticket from there, and covered all our expenses while we were together, including buying her a $2,000 jade necklace and matching earrings that she'd been eyeing during one of our stops. I said goodbye with a passionate kiss, but didn't make any promises to stay in touch, though she seemed to be hoping for one. Even though the time we spent together felt like a dream come true, I'm certain that, even without Linda's warning, I wouldn't have promised to meet again. No matter how passionate Sarah was, I couldn't bring myself to walk down the path of infidelity again. After I dropped Sarah off at the Los Angeles airport, I managed to avoid falling in love with her, but I found myself driving north towards Palo Alto. That's the thing about living out your fantasies for a short while. There's always the risk that something unexpected might change your life. It took me 2 days of leisurely travel to shake off that feeling. Then a good idea struck me, one that had been inspired by Sarah, and I set it into motion. The first idea I had was to reach out to my daughter, Emily, who's now a sophomore at Stanford, and try to mend our relationship. She wasn't exactly warm during our phone call, but when I promised to take her and her 2 friends out for a fancy dinner and a play, she perked up. Emily's 2 friends were just as bright and sophisticated as she was, and I did my best to charm them. I think I succeeded, at least partially, because they invited me to join them for tailgating the next day before the football game, and Emily didn't object. I took them up on the offer, Met a couple of male students at the tailgate who seemed interested in Emily, and bought tickets for her and one of her male friends, don't call him a boyfriend, to join me at the game instead of sitting in the student section. Emily and I had dinner together afterward, and we had a heart-to-heart conversation. By the time I left Stanford late that Saturday night, Emily seemed to have a much better understanding of my situation with the divorce from her unfaithful mother, and any lingering tension between us was resolved. The second idea that crossed my mind required a bit more boldness. When I left Minneapolis, dating again wasn't really on my radar, but my time with Sarah and the boost in self-confidence that came with it changed that. While going through my divorce, I had subconsciously entertained the idea of eventually finding someone new, and my experience with Sarah brought that idea to the forefront. I knew a relationship with her could lead to complications, but at that moment, I didn't care. In fact, knowing it might irritate Laura made it even more appealing. It felt like a way to get some much-needed revenge. The woman who came to mind was the only one I'd ever been attracted to during my marriage to Laura, though I'd never acted on it. Nicole, a smart, personable, divorced woman my age, who looked like she could have been a model. I called her on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock Minneapolis time, and she picked up on the second ring. After some brief pleasantries, I got straight to the point. Nicole, I have a reason for calling that goes beyond just catching up. I was wondering if you'd be interested in seeing Dear Evan Hansen and Mean Girls with me. I didn't realize those were playing in Minneapolis, she responded. They're not. They're in San Francisco, and that's where I am right now, I said. There was a pause before Nicole asked, You're serious, aren't you? I've never been more serious. I'll cover the cost of a first-class ticket for you and leave the return date open, I replied cheerfully. You expect me to just drop everything? What's going on here? She asked. I don't expect you to do anything, Nicole. I'm just hoping you'll join me. I've got tickets lined up, and I'd really love your company. You probably don't know this, but I've always cared about you very deeply. Oh, I knew that, she laughed. But I always respected you for not acting on it while you were married. I swallowed hard, grateful she couldn't see me blushing. So, I'm going to have to stay the night. What's the plan? She asked, a teasing note in her voice. Yes, probably for 3 or 4 nights. I'll book you a hotel room, I promised, feeling a bit shy. There was a brief pause before she responded with a playful tone. Will that be fun? Just make sure our room has a big double bed, in case you're a restless sleeper. I could practically hear the devilish grin in her voice. While we talked, I was already checking my schedule and looking up flight times. I can get there by 7 on Tuesday evening, she said, but don't plan anything for Tuesday night. We'll need that time to get reacquainted. Nicole might not be a goddess, but she's as passionate as any woman could be. She has an incredibly toned, elastic body and a sky-high libido, along with a strong yet genuinely cheerful personality. After 2 nights of trying every possible position and exploring each other in ways only years of knowing someone could allow, I found myself falling in love. 5 days after picking her up at the airport, Nicole and I were on our way to Portland, Oregon. Since we have 4 days ahead of us, maybe you should consider getting some of those little blue pills, she teased, because I plan on using you to the point of exhaustion, and I want to make sure you're smiling when you collapse.